Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Working with Suppliers to Improve Energy Efficiency and to Reduce Scope 3 Emissions. Before we begin, I'm going to run through a couple of housekeeping items. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. You can submit questions for the Q&A session via the chat box to the host. To access the chat box, hover your mouse over the bottom of the screen and click the bubble icon. A link to a recording of the session and presentation slides will be sent to all registrants after the webinar. That is it for me. I'll pass things over to Danny McRae to start today's presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Rosemary. Welcome, everyone. Assuming you can hear me, is that right?
Yes.
All right, great. So as Rosemary said, we are doing a pre-webinar poll. So if you're just joining, please consider pressing the polling button on the right and answering that. I'm Danny McRae. I'm with US EPA's Energy Star program. Before we get started, I'm just going to give a few updates. So first, every year, Energy Star hosts a conference for its industrial partners. This year, the meeting will take place on September 19th and 20th in Atlanta. This is an in-person meeting after a 2-year hiatus, so we're very excited to see as many of you who can travel, because this will be a really great opportunity to reestablish networking in person, which is one of the key benefits of the program. But if you aren't able to attend, there will be an option for you to listen into a few sessions. And if you haven't been before, this is a manufacturing-only conference. Most presentations are given by other manufacturers. It's in a no-sell environment. So this is really one of the best conferences you can attend to learn about industrial energy efficiency and decarbonization and seeing what others are doing. And right after the conference is the AEE World Conference. So you can get 2 for 1 in the same location. AEE is running the Energy Star registration. There is a little bit of a delay getting that live. They are close, so keep this on your calendar and expect an email from us soon with the registration link. Now, one of the most popular sessions for our annual meeting is a top project session. During this, EPA recognizes some of the companies that have implemented energy and decarbonization projects that are considered to be the most innovative or most impactful by your peers. So any manufacturer who attends the meeting can nominate one of their projects. To do this, you'll just need to send us an overview of the project by Monday, August 5th. And prior to the meeting in September, anyone who registers can vote on which project they like best. And again, all that this requires is a write-up of what you did, how you implemented the project, and the impact it had. And I saw the registration list and who's in the meeting right now. And I know a lot of you have done energy efficiency and decarbonization projects this past year. So I don't think you really need to look far to find something to submit. We did send full instructions in email in June and a few follow-up emails. But if you haven't received it and want more information, just put a note in the chat and I'll follow up with you. Now, I couldn't get a slide on this next announcement because it only came by yesterday, but the Partner of the Year applications were just posted to the Energy Star website. And the big change this year is that there are separate applications for sustained excellence, one for industrial partners and one for commercial building partners. Betsy Dutrow, the leader of the industrial program, sent a calendar invitation to companies that have applied to sustained excellence in the past. If you haven't received that and are interested in applying, reach out to Betsy or put a note in the chat and I'll forward that to you. So now our main topic for today is how companies are working with their suppliers to improve energy efficiency and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And again, if you're just joining in, we do have a pre-webinar poll on the right. Please click the polling question and give us an idea of where in your organization you sit. Do you work on the facilities, utility side, on the comm side, or maybe are you a buyer and you operate on the procurement side? And then also let us know what kind of role you have in helping your organization reduce its emissions. Do you have a big role, you have a small role, maybe you support it when you're asked, or you don't have any role at all. So I'll give maybe 10 seconds and then we'll show the results. And again, this is just to get an idea of where people are currently with the issues so that we can make sure that we tailor our presentations to where you're at. So let's close it in 3, 2, 1. Rosemary, can you show the results? Okay, so for the people who did answer, where are most people on this call? It looks like most of the people on the call have their primary role is going to be in sustainability, followed by engineering and operations. So on the ops and production side. And then we also have some folks in EHS and facilities. And we have one person so far whose job is solely for procurement. And then to the next question, what kind of role do you have in scope 3 reductions? 25% say they have a small role. Over 6% have a low role and no role, and 19% have a big role of the people who answered. So one thing to keep in mind, even if you have a small role or no role, during this webinar, we're going to hear how some of our presenters have leveraged the skills of people who are on the ops and engineering side to help. So this will give you some ideas. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, because we're talking about scope 3 emissions, remember scope 1 emissions are emissions from direct operations, scope 2 usually from electricity, and scope 3 are emissions mainly from your supply chain. And the reason why this is important is because for some companies, scope 3 emissions can account for more than 90% of the emissions from their organization. And scope 3 is the most challenging because now you're dealing with emissions outside of your operations. But despite the challenge, we are seeing companies taking action. Here are 2 brands that you're probably familiar with. They're actually creating labels that show the embodied emissions of their products. So we are seeing that this is becoming more transparent and important. And this graph over here, and actually I should say thank you to Colgate for this slide. I borrowed it from one of their previous presentations. But this slide over here is a chart from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And it shows a few different ways companies are helping their suppliers or how companies are reducing their scope 3 emissions. So on the right, we see some financial mechanisms. Companies will either provide incentives or have penalties for suppliers for reducing their emissions. And on the left side are non-financial mechanisms, which includes reporting your carbon or helping suppliers improve. And based on the polling question, I think most people on this call are involved in the ops side. And what you could bring to the table, you're bringing a very critical skill to the table because you've helped your organizations improve its efficiency, reduce its emissions, and that's critical for helping suppliers as well. So you could add a lot to the table by seeing how you can leverage the skill of your teams to help your suppliers. Now, our speakers today are going to talk about how they use the skills of their staff to help the suppliers. They'll talk about activities that they did and also what their general scope 3 reduction strategies are. We're going to hear first from General Motors, from Bob Beard and Chris Rizzi. They're going to talk about GM's strategy, and they're going to go into detail on how they use treasure hunts to help their suppliers. And then we'll turn it over to Ron Jacoby, who sits on the procurement side, on the sourcing side at Colgate-Palmolive. He's going to talk about their strategy, how they've internalized scope 3 reductions internally and externally, and helped suppliers build capacity. So now I'm going to turn it over to Bob from GM, and he will give an introduction of their strategy and what they're doing. So I think we'll give the ball to Chris and then unmute Bob.
Hi, I'm working on unmuting.
Okay, just give us a moment. We were having a few technical difficulties with unmuting Bob.
All right, Bob, you should be unmuted.
I'm unmuted. Okay.
Mhm.
Good. So I'm Bob Baird with General Motors, and one of the ways we've been trying to help with the Scope 3 impact of our suppliers is supplier treasure hunts. Let's go to slide 2, Chris. So our discussion today, we're going to talk about, we want to include everybody. We want to really reach out and do that. How we're doing the supply chain sustainability, energy treasure hunt, which follows the EPA's methodology in many ways, and then continuing with the supplier initiatives, again, what the process kind of looks like and how we engage, and then what are some of the best practices and things we've learned. Next slide, please. So when we looked at our science-based targets and looked at some of our commitments, realizing a significant amount of our emissions are Scope 3, but they're related to our product, the tailpipe emissions. So about 84% of General Motors' emissions are related to the product. Only like 2% is our Scope 1 and Scope 2, the actual emissions of our factories. And the topic today, the 14% mainly around our suppliers. So we're working to get 1 million electric vehicles out in North America by 2025. And we want 40 to 50% of our sales to be electric to help with those tailpipe emissions. And then by 2035, we want to eliminate those. But we're also, again, working with the supply chain to see how we can minimize that portion of the piece of the pie. Let's go to the next slide, please, Chris. So when our leadership signed up for the science-based targets and said 0, 0, 0, 0 crashes, 0 emissions, and 0 congestion, we realized that we needed to reach out to the suppliers. But as we thought about this, many of the suppliers maybe didn't have all of the tools or the knowledge, so we thought an introduction, an orientation to help build the knowledge base, and also how do we integrate the sustainability into our purchasing and procurement strategy. And one of the things that is really neat about this effort is we have a global supply chain sustainability army. We've asked across the organization for volunteers that have a passion for sustainability, and they're helping us do this outreach to the suppliers. We've also had an educational leg where we've been doing symposiums, much like this one, monthly supplier webinars, and then we piloted a treasure hunt with Lear Corporation to really understand how we might share and collaborate. Out of that, we've moved into a kind of a growth phase where we're including success stories from the suppliers and the information that we're sharing, best practices, and then we're, again, because of COVID and whatnot, much of this is being done virtually to make it easier for the suppliers to replicate and share across the various facilities. And then as far as the collaboration, many of the findings and the information is on the SharePoint link that is highlighted there on that slide. Let's go ahead for the next one, Chris. And again, what is a treasure hunt? But it's an opportunity to bring people's knowledge and engagement in the energy arena forward. It typically looks at low cost or no cost opportunities. It helps support your continuous improvement activities and being cross-functional, but it also reduces cost. It reduces the impact on the community. And again, hopefully this sparks employee ownership and engagement. So next. At this point, I think Chris is going to continue the discussion.
All right, thanks, Bob. Hope everyone can hear me. Good morning and afternoon to everyone from wherever you may be calling in from across the country or the globe today. My name is Chris Rizzi. I'm a sustainability intern for General Motors. I've been with GM for over a year now, or actually almost 16 months now, in the sustainability group out of our Sustainable Workplaces organization. But in this role, I've been supporting our global purchasing and supply chain sustainability group in a number of our goals, including the supplier ESG pledge. But as well, I'm on the team that carries out some of our supplier initiatives in the area of energy. So in global purchasing and supply chain, we have a number of supplier initiatives and ways of engaging our suppliers in important topics and areas of sustainability, and specifically in energy, in the case of the examples on our slide, that affect each of our businesses, us as well as our supplier partners. So in the scope of energy, the GM Supplier Energy Working Group has a few initiatives that we'd like to highlight, those being the energy webinars, our forums, and our treasure hunts, of course. So GM hosts monthly energy webinars aimed, similar to this one, right, aimed to engage our suppliers and their facility practitioners in topics and issues such as energy conservation, goal setting, facility equipment, renewable energy, and much more. And we invite external speakers, suppliers, and GM members to come and present. And on this slide, you could see the diversity in external speakers, ranging from organizations such as the Clean Energy Buyers Association, as well as utility companies such as Consumers and DTE. As well, we host symposiums throughout the year. Last November, we hosted our second annual energy symposium, focused on renewable energy, discussing renewable energy as a sound business decision, as well as carbon neutrality. And the virtual event was public, and our suppliers and our partners discussed carbon neutrality and the immediate tangible opportunities and resources available to accelerate action. And the symposium saw a global reach of over 1,600 participants, 750 companies, and spanning across 25 countries. So one of the main initiatives that I want to talk about today is our treasure hunts. And the General Motors Sustainability Group conducts energy treasure hunts with suppliers to drive energy and water reduction efforts at our Tier 1 and Tier 2 supplier facilities. And the program's success is embedded in its collaborative framework, identifying potential energy reduction and financial savings opportunities at suppliers' manufacturing facilities. These treasure hunts collectively have provided recommendations to save over 10,000 megawatt hours of energy, about 26,000 cubic meters of water, and as well as eliminating 5,600 metric tons of CO2 emissions. And the treasure hunts are conducted at a few of the suppliers' facilities, taking the facility through the process of conducting a treasure hunt while simultaneously investigating opportunities and sharing knowledge and best practices. So the treasure hunt process that GM conducts is adopted, of course, with the help of external sources such as Energy Star's Treasure Hunt How-To Guide. And the process is divided into 3 phases. So first, we identify potential suppliers and facilities that we'd like to be involved. Now, this is done in a number of different ways. So for example, in our energy webinars and our forums, we discuss and highlight the Energy Treasure Hunt program as an excellent tool at an energy manager's disposal for finding energy saving opportunities. We have surveys to gauge the interest from our supply chain partners, and also utilize our webinars and our forums to create an interest around the program. Once we have identified suppliers and facilities that are interested and engaged, we establish team members that can be involved from both the facility as well as the GM side. We utilize team members from within GPSC and the GPSC Sustainability Army that Bob was talking about before to lead these projects with our supply chain partners. We share initial questions to start to learn about the facility's operations and their energy use, maybe some of their equipment and their biggest energy users, and some of their current energy saving project ideas. Next, we enter into a data collection phase where we're collecting utility data, we're completing modules and tools to estimate potential savings and identifying potential opportunities. Finally, from there, we review our action list and we screen for high priority items, and we populate our template leadership presentation for review with our suppliers plant leadership. Once the treasure hunt is completed, the partnership doesn't really stop there. We have quarterly follow-ups with our supplier facilities to continue the partnership and check in on project implementation. So as I mentioned before, a part of the process is to complete a number of modules in our energy treasure hunt tool. Firstly, we collect utility data in the form of electricity, natural gas, and water, both usage and cost. Along with production units or any form really that would provide a baseline, anything like production hours or employees or employee hours, we collect that so that we can look at intensity figures. Now, the aim of this step really is to identify how energy usage changes throughout the year and where opportunities might lie. Now, another key part of this that I'll mention is we also like to look at interval data, such as hourly or 15-minute interval data. Now we have a number of modules containing calculations and formulas for energy reductions and saving opportunities. In the yellow and blue font, you can see some examples of the modules that we have pertaining to energy and water. Now, for example, our compressed air module has calculations for how users can calculate energy savings from either a pressure reduction or maybe a leak reduction as an example. And these tools were all developed internally by GM members. So from there, once we've completed the treasure hunt and identified potential projects and savings, we present our findings to the plant's leadership. And this really gives an opportunity for our suppliers' facility members to speak directly to their leadership, which may not be something that they get to do very often of. And this is an example of the deliverables from the treasure hunt. So highlighted in this slide are top action items, so the priority projects to be implemented. We have a savings dashboard highlighting those total overall savings, both in dollars as well as energy usage. Below that, we have a visual showing water and emissions savings, of course, showing priority to the emissions that could be saved from these projects. And lastly, in the bottom left corner, we highlight the in-progress and best practice items that we see from our suppliers' facilities. And those are just some of the examples from what we've seen from treasure hunts on the slide. So lastly, I just want to touch on some best practices and lessons learned from our experience with treasure hunts with suppliers. Firstly, data is really important, right? Opportunities lie when you look at the information, and you have to be able to look through it to find that nugget of gold. An example I'll give is during one of our treasure hunts, a facility noticed that when they were looking at that interval data, that every day at the same time in the afternoon, their compressed air jumped, and it was costing them a lot of money. And through investigation, they found that a specific employee was taking a compressed air shower every day for about 10 minutes, and that alone was causing their energy usage to be much higher, right? And so it is important to go after and look at your data. Number two is find the low-hanging fruit. Many of us know about treasure hunts. They're focused on low cost or no cost efficiency improvements. Some of the projects that have provided the greatest savings and at a payback period of zero or essentially zero, because they incurred no cost to the supplier, was simply turning off pieces of equipment during non-production times or during times when you weren't using it. Third is highlight the best practices at the facility. When we engage with the facility teams, we don't want them to feel like we are trying to tell them what to do at their own facilities or make them feel like they don't know how to run them efficiently. We're always sure to applaud the work that the facility is doing. And we saw that because we do that, we highlight that in the leadership presentation. Next, don't reinvent the wheel, right? Same idea with the low-hanging fruit. Many opportunities to save energy are not groundbreaking or innovative ideas, right? From our experience with several treasure hunts, we consistently see very similar opportunities at all of the plants. And so approaching these first saves you a lot of time. Next to last is Spark ownership. So you might ask yourself, how much time do these projects take, and how much time or how much GM time do they take up? Well, the answer is that it varies, of course, but ensuring that our suppliers, facilities team members feel empowered in this process allows them to take ownership of the opportunities, of the results, of all of the tools and the resources that we provide. And lastly, communication is key. At the end of the day, we all have the same common goal. Finding efficiency improvements should be a collaborative experience. So we try to have fun, we try to share ideas, and keep that common goal of energy improvements at the forefront. All right, and with that, I want to say thank you to all of you for listening to us discuss about our Energy Treasure Hunt program and how that and some of our other initiatives fall into our broader supplier initiatives and our supply chain sustainability strategy. And of course, thanks to Danny and Rosemary and the Energy Star team for bringing us on for this webinar. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Great presentation, and I'm shocked to hear about that compressed air shower, but glad you guys were able to help your supplier find that. All right, so we're gonna launch another mid-webinar poll just to get an idea of yeah, let me go to the next slide. We want to get an idea of what some of you have done with your suppliers. So again, go to the polling icon to the right and tell us, one, what areas have you gauged your suppliers? Is it greenhouse gases, renewable energy, energy efficiency? We know that there are distinct pathways between energy and efficiency and renewables. So curious to see what you're focusing with. And then also tell us how you've engaged suppliers. So Chris and Bob from GM, they said that one of their key tools are treasure hunts, which are similar to audits, but we know that they are different. But maybe your organizations are doing webinars, are doing one-on-one calls, competitions. Let us know what you're doing. And if you're doing something else, put it in the chat. While you're doing that, Chris, just have a question from you. So the treasure hunt program, it seems like it's very effective, very robust, but I imagine that this is taking a lot of time of GM staff. Can you tell us a little bit about who's taking on the cost and how much time GM staff from facilities needs to spend on this?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Danny. So we kind of mentioned it before, but one of the biggest things that we have a part of our program is the GPSC Sustainability Army. And they are employees at General Motors that are passionate about sustainability. And they are not just they're not just environmental engineers at our facilities. They're not just people that are part of our sustainability group. They're folks that are part of IT. They're folks that are part of marketing and of course, global purchasing and supply chain. People that work as buyers, that work closely with suppliers that are all passionate about sustainability. And they all volunteer, right, as part of their regular day job to help with these treasure hunts and help lead them with suppliers and take them through the process. Now, of course, it does take an amount of time, a considerable amount of time on GM's on GM side, but we are, of course, exploring new options for how we can limit that. But at the end of the day, we are able to provide expertise to our suppliers' facilities and help them reduce energy uses and emissions, which impacts our scope 3.
All right. And then how are you getting leadership support and engagement?
I don't know, Bob, if you wanted to take that one.
Team before you, basically, we had a group that went to executive leadership, the board of directors, and talked about the need of science-based targets, the need for reductions. And we've had reduction goals of our consumption for a long, long time, but we haven't necessarily linked it to emissions. And as a part of that, again, the analysis was done that showed our product was the big pull. The next biggest poll, which maybe was surprising, wasn't really our manufacturing operation, but was the suppliers. So we realized at that point in time, the leadership realized that we needed to include the purchasing people in this effort and trying to see how we can take it forward. So it was pretty much a top down. We want to go to zero. We will go to zero. Now everybody get involved and see how we can do that. So there's been tremendous support from our leadership, and yet there was a lot of flexibility offered to figure out how we wanted to best address the issue.
Thank you, Bob. So it seems like you have the goal and leadership is serious about the goal, so they're going to devote resources to it. All right, let's see what other people on the call have done around supplier engagement, and then we'll go to our next presentation. Can you share the results, Rosemary? All right, so from folks who have responded, it looks like the biggest response is that you're engaging suppliers around energy efficiency, and that webinars, one-on-one calls, and benchmarking suppliers are some of the most common mechanisms for engagement. And then behind that, there are treasure hunts and conferences and symposiums. So I'm now going to turn it over to Ron Jacoby from sourcing at Colgate-Palmolive, and he's going to talk to you very broadly about Colgate-Palmolive's strategy and then a bunch of different activities that they have done or are planning to do in the future to help reduce their Scope 3 emissions. So Ron, take it away.
Great, thanks, Danny. And you can hear me clearly, correct?
Yes.
You can see my screen. Great, excellent. No, so thank you for that. So as Danny had mentioned, my name is Ron Jacoby. I work for Colgate-Palmolive Company. I lead our sustainable and responsible sourcing initiatives within our procurement organization. And today I want to talk a little bit about engaging suppliers on climate. And want to begin that with just a little bit of a brief, overview and history of what Colgate's done as a company, and talk a little bit about our strategy and approach to engaging the suppliers on climate, and then we'll get into some of the specific engagement activities. So Colgate has been taking action on climate for over 20 years now. And you can see here a number of the basically a timeline, a history of what we've been doing. We do work closely with entities like Energy Star. We are a partner of Energy Star, and also have done a tremendous number of energy treasure hunts within our own operations. But looking at sort of this 20-year timeline, what I will point out is that the majority of our focus during I'd say up until 2020 has really been focused on reduction of our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. And as we move forward into some of the strategy slides, which I'll share, that kind of created the need for us to be able to engage our suppliers on a much deeper level. So in 2020, we launched our new 2025 Sustainability and Social Impact Strategy. And as part of that, we identified 11 sustainability actions that you can see here in 3 core buckets: driving social impact, helping millions of homes, and then really what we'll be focusing on today is preserving our environment, and the 2 areas of really climate focus, which is accelerating action on climate change, which is really continuing to focus on the work that we need to do within our own operations, and then driving sustainable sourcing, where we focus on engaging suppliers to help reduce our Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions. As I think the GM team had mentioned, we've also done our analysis of Colgate's carbon footprint, and essentially, if we look at our full value chain footprint, the vast majority of our footprint is within the consumer use of our products. But if we exclude the consumer use of that, it becomes quite apparent that our raw materials and packaging materials have a significant carbon impact, and approximately 85% of our Scope 3 emissions are associated with raw and packaging materials, and are really focused on a group of about 250 suppliers. So as part of our strategy, and we've had Scope 1 and Scope 2 science-based targets for a number of years, but as part of our 2025 strategy, it was really important for us to have that science-based target for our Scope 3, so our purchased goods and services. And showing here on the slide is just really the glide paths to reducing those various scopes. And I'll point out down the bottom in red, you can see the specific Scope 3 targets that we have, all of which lead us to a net zero goal in 2040. So for 2025, a reduction of 20% versus these are all versus our 2020 baseline, a goal, a target for a 2030, and then ultimately our 2040 goal. So I'll use this this approach flow here, and I'll go back to this a few times just to kind of guide what I'll share today. But so we really kind of ticked the first box there by establishing our targets, our goals and targets. But then it was really moving forward to setting say specific expectations that were beyond just asking our suppliers to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. So we went through an exercise of identifying specific asks that we would convey to suppliers, and some of those I'm showing here on the screen here. And I guess one of the other points that I'll point out here is we have many suppliers that kind of cut across the whole maturity base. So we have some suppliers that are quite mature, that are already doing almost all the items on this slide, and then we have some suppliers that are less mature, that are really at that first step on their journey, where they're really just starting to measure their energy use. So we wanted to try to have an ask that encompassed a number of those. So, things like just starting out and measuring energy and exploring renewable energies and maximizing energy efficiencies through the use of things like energy treasure hunts is kind of one of those key action items, right? So, but in addition to that, ensuring that suppliers are establishing goals and targets, and that they are reporting on that progress. And then as you sort of start to get to some of the more mature suppliers, really aligning on goals that are truly science-based targets, approved science-based targets, and ultimately suppliers that are then conducting material life cycle assessments that are ultimately helping us to understand the carbon footprint of the products that are being sold to Colgate. So kind of moving from having those goals and targets and setting some of those expectations, we'll then talk about supplier segmentation and engagement. And when one starts to talk about engaging suppliers, and many companies have thousands of suppliers, if not tens of thousands of suppliers, what are some of those challenges? And some of the questions like, where do you start to focus those efforts? What are your internal capabilities and resources? What's the maturity of your supply base? How is it scalable? So how do you engage thousands of suppliers? But ultimately, and then questions around data, right? Availability and quality is a big key point. So what I'll try to do over the next few slides is to kind of reflect on a few of these items as part of our approach. And we really started first with the pyramid that you can see here on the left-hand side and said, okay, if we look at our suppliers and look at them through a segmentation model where we look at capability and we look at approach, and if we sort of start at the top of the pyramid with what we call our SES suppliers or our sustainability expert suppliers, these are really suppliers that have mature capabilities. They have a program in place, and really the approach with those is a very direct engagement. It's more of a collaborative approach, talking about sustainability innovation and thinking of them as a learning partner. Then as we move down to sort of our core supplier area, these are really the suppliers that have a moderate degree of capability, and they still have programs that are developing. And from an approach perspective, we see this is a group of suppliers that is kind of in between the two. So, you can have some of the more mature approaches, but then you also have some suppliers that are somewhat less mature. And then you have the base, and the base really is suppliers that have that are just starting on their journey. And really the focus with them, again, is on some of the capability building, the support and technical guidance. I'm going to start first with the middle of the pyramid, because this is an area of our supply base that we've been engaging with for a number of years. And this is really this core, along with the SES suppliers, are really the group of suppliers that we ask to report via CDP climate on an annual basis. So we engage this group of suppliers in pre-reporting webinars with CDP to talk about our expectations and what our asks are. What we're planning on doing this year is also to be engaging the suppliers on the back end of the reporting, so sort of going back to them on a progress report and where we stand and reflecting on those expectations. Next, at the top of the pyramid, are SES suppliers. These, again, are really those that suppliers that we can partner with and learn from in specific areas of sustainability and climate. So some of these suppliers, as I had mentioned, they already have science-based targets. They're reporting on CDP. They also are suppliers that tend to be some of our highest carbon impact materials, and essentially are really looking for customers to partner with. And then really at the base of the pyramid are a lot of the small and medium suppliers that are earlier in their journey. They tend to have limited resources to support actions, but they're really still critical for achieving our net zero goals. And the other point that I'll raise here is the fact that, when you're looking at that base of 4,000 suppliers, having a scalable engagement mechanism that you can engage them with is really key. And I'll talk a little bit about that in some of the future slides. So as it relates to some of the actions that we've taken this year and have planned for the later half of this year and then 2023, I'll again kind of start with the bottom. I mean, right now we're kind of all wrapping up CDP climate disclosures. So that's something that we engage the suppliers with, but also in our 2021 reporting, we also developed a calculation methodology that really allows us to better utilize some of the CDP data that helps support our carbon reduction goals. The kind of jumping to the top, and I'll talk a little bit about an initiative there in a minute, but we executed what we call our first supplier climate forum. And I'll share some more details about that on the next slide. And one of the other areas that we've been focused on is piloting a survey with our suppliers to inquire about material carbon footprints on the materials that they sell to Colgate. So in this case, for years, everybody's been using industry standard carbon factors to be able to look at carbon for scope 3. What we're trying to do here is to drive a better understanding of and get more accurate data around suppliers' materials. The other thing that I'll point out, kind of jumping to the base of the pyramid, is that we are looking at a number of digital scalable solutions that we're looking to roll out with that much larger group that will help us to do not only engagement through that platform, but also to measure performance. And then cutting across all of these is really a number of things that are really critical to helping our teams to engage suppliers, which is really socializing and building those capabilities, both internally and with the suppliers, but also then developing tools, scorecards and dashboards to help facilitate those engagements and measuring performance. So just quickly on our June 30th Supplier Climate Forum. So we convened a meeting with 12 of our top suppliers and 3 industry partners. So WBCSD, EPA Energy Star participated that, and JBE, one of our core consultants. And it was really focused around sharing climate visions and goals, promoting learning, building capabilities, and really providing an opportunity for to hear from our suppliers and engage across our organizations. Some of the key topics that we talked about, first and foremost was around the importance of energy efficiency. So we talked about energy treasure hunts and provided some of the resources that were available through Energy Star. We talked a lot about WBCSD, talked about Scope 3 industry trends and data challenges. And then we talked a little bit about our calculation of Scope 3 reductions, as well as introduced these material level carbon footprints. And we see this initial supplier climate forum as a model for us to be able to roll that out and continue to engage with other segments of our supply base as we move forward. One of the other areas when we look at sort of that core and the base, I would say is and shifting some of the maturity level and the approach away from really that collaborative partnership and learning to capability building and technical support and guidance. And I think that this is really where a key action is kind of bringing together the facilities and operations and EOH&S folks, sustainability and procurement, because each one of these groups brings together a different level of expertise and information that can be shared with suppliers to help them on their journey. So as I mentioned earlier, Colgate's been working in this space for over 20 years within our own operations. So we've had a lot of success, and we have the opportunity to share a lot of the learnings, within our own operations with our suppliers. So it's really also been sharing that. It's been facilitating access to some of our industry partners and the relationships that we've developed, the resources and tools. And really then to establish that learning and support environment with suppliers, and to really help connect with industry partners to help drive the change that we're all looking for. Next, kind of shifting gears into measuring performance, and I'll say that this is always a bit of an iterative process where we're measuring performance, but we're also always calibrating socialization and capability building hand in hand in that area. So some of the things that we are in the process of continuing to roll out are things like training decks for our procurement folks, both internal and external webinars, and developing those capabilities. Deploying dashboards and engagement tools, right? It's around leveraging available data that we have to help understand status and performance expectations. And I think the other one key point that's important to point out is that engaging the supplier sort of at the level of maturity that they're at, but also, helping them to understand that progress is definitely important, and that's the expectation. We've sort of engaged suppliers, I'd say, in a number of different ways. We have top-to-top meetings with suppliers. We have regular business meetings, but also we've enabled that engagement through a number of different webinars that help really to kind of share progress, align on actions, and then deploy incentives. And I'll talk a little bit about incentives in a minute. Really, the last step that I have on our approach flow here is around governance, and I'll call it governance, but I'm primarily going to focus here a little bit on incentivization. And when we talk about incentivizing, and I think there was a mention of incentivizing, I think Danny had mentioned it earlier, but there's a number of different ways that suppliers can be incentivized, and most of the time people think about the commercial incentivization, but there's a number of others, such as rewards and recognitions, things like supplier awards, which is particularly important, I would say, around some of the medium and smaller suppliers. Also facilitating access to capability building. So it's either funding capability building opportunities or conducting webinars with industry partners to help drive that. It's also providing technical guidance. So in other words, even connecting suppliers operations with some of our own teams to help drive that change. And also then collaboration projects, which tend to be projects that we would be focusing on with those more mature suppliers. And again, sort of the incentivizing approach really does depend on the maturity of suppliers and their criticality of supply to our company. And lastly, and Danny had mentioned this earlier, but I'll again kind of put a reference in here for WBCSD, so the World Business Council, and some of the work that they've been doing on incentivizing supply chains on decarbonization. So there's a link on it here, and I would definitely recommend people to take a look at that if you have the opportunity to do so. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for the time. Thank Danny and the EPA Energy Star team for inviting us. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ron. I think it's really great to see how you segment different suppliers and then all the different activities and strategy behind that. All right, so I'd like to invite Chris to come back on the screen. Ron, you can as well, and Bob, you can unmute yourself, and we'll have some Q&A. Rosemary, we could take the slides down as well. So if anyone has questions for any of the panelists, please put it in the chat, and we'll try to get to your question. But maybe to start, so both of you mentioned that part of your strategy is to connect your experts in EHS and facilities with the buyers, because there's a lot that they could offer. They've already done a lot of this in your companies. Can you talk a little bit more about how those connections are made? Like, people on the ops side, they're going to have their own set of responsibilities. This is kind of additional. So what are some tips for connecting those groups together?
I'll jump in and go first, Danny, if you want. I guess if we're open miking it. So yeah, I think a lot of it is dependent upon how your company is organized and sort of how you structure how you're. So for us at Colgate, yes, I'm in the procurement organization, but I have a very, very close relationship and partnership with our corporate sustainability team. And on the corporate sustainability side, their EOH&S professionals at each of the plants are part of that same organization. So for Colgate, it's been the fact that I guess we're lucky that we're kind of organized in a way that that we sort of have that quick that liaison between our organizational functional units to be able to pull from our supply chain. We're also all part of our supply chain organization. So it sort of makes it very easy for us to have that engagement into our plant operations teams, typically through our environmental, occupational health, and safety professionals.
Thank you. Chris or Bob?
Yeah, I mean, I could echo the same thing. A number of these initiatives that we talked about today are, they fall in the global purchasing and supply chain organization, but of course we work so closely with our sustainability group. That kind of falls under manufacturing. And, I've touched upon the sustainability army, and, that's been a huge factor for our initiatives in GPSC as well. And that was kind of just about asking our employees, if they are passionate about sustainability, to join this group. And, I would be remiss if I didn't say, one thing I would say, we did a butterfly contest, a butterfly picture contest at GM, where we asked our employees to submit pictures of butterflies and other things related to biodiversity. And we had so many people submit pictures. And the one thing we realized was people are really interested in biodiversity. So one thing I'd say is, if you never know what your employees are interested in unless you ask them. And that was something that came out of the GPSC Sustainability Army.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit more about the, go on, Bob.
Just real quick, yeah, another thing that we've tried real hard out of the treasure hunts and the efforts we've made is to break that link between the suppliers saving money and reducing costs to General Motors. Even though this initiative's coming out of the purchasing arena, again, eventually we want to do what's right for the community and the supplier, and we expect that the supplier is going to do what's right for General Motors ultimately. But to improve the cooperation, it's real important to not have this be go do it and pay me besides. So anyway, you had a question about butterflies, Danny?
Not about butterflies, but Chris was talking about the GPSC Sustainable Army. Was there any more information that you wanted to provide on that that may be useful for others?
Yeah, I don't know if that was directed at me, Danny. Sorry, but I mean, I would say just that, you know, for specifically as well for the treasure hunts, we have folks that are coming in and joining that maybe don't even have any knowledge of energy management, but they're just passionate about sustainability and the environment. And one thing about how we manage it internally is that we ensure that we are training our employees on how to conduct energy treasure hunts, on how to engage with suppliers, and it's a learning process for them as well.
Yeah. Great. So similar kind of question. You just said how you connect your sustainability experts to buyers internally. But then when you're talking to your suppliers, like typically the relationship between the client and the supplier is the buyer and someone from procurement, they're going to have the relationship. But you both were saying that you're able to connect people on facilities on your end to people on facilities on the other end. How do you work with your key supplier contact to make sure that they are bringing the right people to the table for these webinars or treasure hunts or what have you?
Well, and that's an interesting challenge, Danny, because typically the people we interface with are the account managers or the GM representative. And yet when we ask them that we want to go into your facility and we want to try and help figure out how to save, whether that's changing lights or whatever, it's it's an operating kind of person as opposed to that business person. So anyway, we encourage to keep the account contact there so that it gets bubbled up to the right levels of the organization. But we also work really, really hard to make sure that as we're doing the treasure hunt process, that we engage those operational people. Now, some of our webinars have been more at a high level, like CDP or some of that more at a corporate level. But we've also tried to tailor some of them to be more focused at the operational kind of people, talking about how does an air compressor work in a compressed air system, which is, again, trying to get the spectrum to bring the knowledge base of the suppliers up.
Yeah, and I guess from the Colgate side, while we don't have, let's say, Colgate folks going into suppliers' operations in that sense, I would say that definitely the approach has been, as you said, most of the procurement teams are engaging with key account managers at the supplier level. So it has been, one of the journeys that we've been on are developing those sustainability relationships. So, connecting our sustainability teams with the sustainability teams at the suppliers, because, that's sort of a critical first step. But that's been the journey, I would say, that we've really been on in the last year, and something that is really critical, I think, to getting the change that we're asking for at the operations level. So I think that for us, it's engaging those sustainability teams, empowering them, giving them the tools, the connections that then they can sort of take that and to really drive that home within their operations with their facilities.
Great. All right. We have 2 minutes left. I think we're going to go over just 1 or 2 minutes over to try to get to all the questions, but I'm going to put 2 questions at once to see if we could try to answer those both. So the first is, have you received pushback from suppliers on providing data for treasure hunts or just for general reporting? And then secondly, have you found any data platforms that are successful in supporting data collection and supplier surveying?
I can jump in there, Dan, I guess first. Yeah, so yes, I mean, I think that to some degree the approach that we've been taking has really been more of a not necessarily mandating, but more of the voluntary reporting at this point. So we've been trying to engage suppliers on that, and I would say that most suppliers that we've been engaging have been open to reporting information. I think the most challenging information that we've now been starting to tackle is material level greenhouse gas, material level carbon footprints, because I think a lot of suppliers are still trying to figure out, how they commercially leverage that information rather than it becoming kind of part of the industry standard, which I think it will over time. As regarding a platform, I think there's a number of platforms out there. There are platforms like EcoVadis, which is continuing to try to expand into that space. CDP, still hasn't really become the golden hoop, I would say, for collecting material level information, but rather corporate information. And there are a number of other tools out there like Sphera, and a few others that are those type survey platforms where you can collect that type of information. But it's still hard to say that there's one platform out there that's levels above any of the other ones, I think.
Thanks. Chris or Bob?
I'll take it on a little bit. For much of our scope 3 right now, we use factors that we may get from the EPA and others to try and project it. And as we're going forward, we have our key suppliers or our major suppliers that we are moving in directions where they're going to be required to give us more information, that eventually, as time goes on, we'll spread that down in Ron's example down the pyramid. But again, we're trying to see where it makes sense to make mandates, where it makes sense to try and commonize on tools or platforms that other OEMs may be using to minimize the burden on the supplier. But we're learning at this point. I don't know that we would say that there's a better or worse. It's just some of the information's complete, some of it's not complete, and some of it's garbage. And for a while, it's just going to take a while to work through some of that.
Okay. Well, thank you. So that's time. If we didn't get a chance to answer a question, we'll see if we could get an answer for you and to communicate over email. But Rosemary, if you could put the last slide on, bring that up. So thank you everyone for being with us today. We do have two other industrial partner webinars this year. We will be sending the slide deck to all attendees and registrants afterwards. But one of the things that we are offering Energy Star partners is we will also send you a link to the recording and a written summary of the webinar. So if you are not sure if you're a partner or if you want more information about the partnership, email me so that you could get that information. All right, so with that, yeah, I guess we're good for the last slide. That covers what I need to say. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to our 3 panelists today. Have a good afternoon and rest of the morning, everyone.
Thank you, Danny. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you all.